Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm shooting this video to show a little practice run on how I would take a string of covered hoppers up to the cement plant where they would be switched out and filled, and also where the grain elevators are. The idea is that this local train is coming through the countryside right now, and it's on its way to the yard to pick up the cement hoppers. It will then load them up in the seaport, onto the ferry, which is the system that takes the cars up to the second level of my layout. I don't have room for a helix, so I use a ferry system that has an elevator on it. So as the train makes its way around the countryside here, past the lumber yard, and now around the mountain, it's about to go into a tunnel, a short tunnel, and the sensors have just been triggered for the crossing gates because after the tunnel there is a crossing. So as the train comes through the exit of the tunnel here, what you're going to see is that I have a large facility on the right side, which is split between the road that's going through town. My idea is that this is a paint facility or a paint factory, and the original building was that gray building with the smokestack, and little by little they started to gain more territory, and that's why they split even beyond that street. This is the main part of town as the train goes through the second crossing, and it's not completed obviously, but it's a small typical town that you would see anywhere in the United States. And there's a road that goes over the tracks in order to get from one side of the town to the other. Now the train is approaching the Y, and as you can see there's another train waiting there. That's my very, very long coal unit train, and that unit train has a 5 locomotive consist that's pulling through, and about 50 cars, maybe a little under. So as the train makes its way through the Y here, it's heading into what would be the short line. And the short line has access to the yard. As you can see, you'll see all the yard facilities and parking and the ladder and everything coming up on the train's right side. What you see back there is the engine facility and some engine and locomotive parking. There's a building so that can oversee the entire yard, and what you're seeing right here is the ladder where all the cars are classified and switched out. And you can see right now they're passing the cars that they're about to pick up, which is that string of short hoppers for cement. So as the train makes its way past those, it needs to figure out how it's going to pick those up. So the idea that I have right now is that once we pass this access road here, we're going to drop off the caboose, then go past that turnout where we just hit, and then back up into the yard and shove back and grab those hoppers. A lot of work has been done on that yard, but there's still obviously some left. But it's getting close to being finished. The crossing that you see it's an access road. It's a small road, and that's why I just used the cross box there and not lights or crossing gates or anything like that. I didn't want to install the one on the closer side because I'm afraid I'm gonna clip it or something. So I'll do that probably toward the end when all the scenery is done. I'm sure I'll break it a few times and I'll have to replace it, but I at least have the other one on the other side. So I just uncoupled from the caboose. I applied the emergency brake, the handbrake, and now we're pulling away so that we can make ourselves switch over to the next track. And obviously there'll be somebody hanging off the back of that tank car there that's about to switch the turnout right here. So as we shove back, you're going to see some of the scenery that I've been working on in the background. The tracks that you see with the black ballast are actually rented space, rented trackage for the coal facility, which is on the other side of this little, area. So that's why you see an abandoned coal house there. That what I imagined is that there was an actual coal facility there, a small one, and then they expanded, moved over to the other side, and they still had some tracks left here. So as the yard got bigger, they took over the territory, and now it's rented from the yard. The house or the building that you see behind the tank cars right now, that brown building is the yard office, and it's got like an equipment shed in the back of it, and it's got a small parking lot there for the people that work in the yard to park their cars, and then obviously take the access road to the rest of the yard. The brown or tan building back there, it's like a mustard color. That's the RIP track that has that shed, so they can, anything they need to do, any repair work they need to do on cars can be done indoors if need be. But there is an outdoor track as well right next to it. So we're about to couple up to the swing cars that we're taking with us. We'll release the brake, the handbrake, once we couple correctly. So the covered hoppers is the one that's got the brake on it right now, so it's released. And now we're going to go ahead and move forward back to the short line, and we're going to have to go back and pick up the caboose once we finish that procedure. The trees that I'm using in the background are super trees. I love them. I think they're very realistic, and I like the way it blends into the background. Now, the backdrop photo that you see there is from a company called Backdrop Junction, and they do really good work. It's they make very long photos, and it's easy to flip them around or customize them any way you need to. So I thought that this particular backdrop fitted nicely with this scene. All right, so we're making our way forward now. Again, we're going to pick up the caboose, and what is going to happen is that once I load all of this onto the ferry, then there's going to be a local train in the upper level that's a grain train basically, and it's going to just grab onto these cars because the grain facility is close or on the way to the cement facility. Therefore, anything that that's going to be run in the upper level, which is a very simple loop, is probably going to be combined with other facilities. I have some space left in the upper level, and I have no idea what I'm going to use it as. It might be for tank cars, maybe some kind of a power plant, or maybe a paper production company or something. So I don't know. I'm still debating what I'm going to do with that. But for now, like I said, once these hoppers come off the ferry, they're going to be dragged around the layout by the grain train, and you'll see a switcher that's going to be at the facility use kind of like a team track to make sure that both the grain cars and the cement cars are being switched out and put in the appropriate place. All right, so we just latched on to the caboose. This coupler is a little defective, so that's why I have to push it in with my hand. And we're going to release the brake so that we can get going and be on our way. What you're seeing here is the entrance to the tunnel, which is really my closet. And I like this because it kind of makes the train disappear for a while. And it seems like it just kind of goes away. So it gives it a very nice sense of distance. And of course, there's the Budweiser plant. There's a giant bottle. That's got to be in most of my layouts. in most of my layout videos. There's always a beer bottle somewhere. So this train will make its way through the closet, and then through the lift-out bridge, which is between the closet and what is really a shower that I'm not using anymore. So I just cut a hole in the wall, and it goes through the shower. So this area where it's going into right now is actually a stand-up shower, one of those plastic things that I cannot use. So that's why it's going through. All right, so this is my grain train. It's making its way around the upper level right now. What I like to do with my layouts is have running trains that just I can leave by themselves to run. So it's not a point-to-point layout. It's just it's like basically a pretzel, and the upper level is more of just a loop, kind of like a dog bone kind of thing, but a little twisted. So yeah, I like to see that there's trains constantly running. I would normally have this grain train running, the one that's behind the local train here, but I didn't have the time to get everything going at once. Plus I had to clean some of the tracks and stuff, and I didn't want a choppy performance. So here's my seaport. This is an oil tanker that just came in and is filling up these tanks right here with the oil cranes. Those green things are scratch built, and that's what loads the oil in or out of the ship. And then there are some tanks that I have placed around the port that would hold the oil until the train pulls in with the tank cars that you see there. So the port acts as a few things. It acts as an oil shipment kind of area. It also acts as a ferry access point, and there's a large warehouse just beyond the ferry that just for transfers and holding merchandise until another train comes and picks it up. So it's got multiple uses, and it's these are the large tanks that are holding the oil from the ship. So now we're going to release the caboose here. This way we can back into the ferry and load these cars in. Now normally I would load about 25 to 30 cars onto the ferry, but this is just a practice run. I'm just trying to get things, I want to see how things are running right now. So it's just going to be these 5 or 6 cars that I'm loading on. So not very efficient for the ferry, but it's going to have to be that way. So what I'm doing right now is just slowly creeping up past the turnout, which will give me access to the ferry spur. And now, of course, the brakeman or the conductor would switch that turnout by hand and jump back on the cement hopper there and call into the engineer to shove back. So obviously the speed limit here is very low. There's traffic, there's trucks coming in and out, there's employees and crew members working, plus you got the ship trying to do its thing, and there's just a lot of traffic, so we have to go very slow here. So as we make our way back, you're going to see that there's going to be a gate that we have to clear right at the apron point, which is what allows you to bring the tracks up to the right height in order to be able to line it up with the ship. Now this particular ferry that I scratch built it's huge compared to what would be like a single level ship or some kind of barge. But I did it on purpose because, like I said before, I don't have a helix, so I have to make sure that I can get an entire train up to the second level if I have to. So this is a 2-level ferry, which I saw, I'm not sure where online, but these ferries do exist, and that's what I used to basically model this ferry. But as you can see, the apron is motorized, and it's making its way up to the upper level right now. I just wanted to test it out. I could have just put them on the lower level, but I wanted to just test out the motor and show everybody how that works. The ship has to be pushed a little bit to meet the tracks, as you can see right there, but it's minimal distance. And once the tracks are lined up, then it's just a matter of going nice and slow and shoving back so that the cars can make their way up onto the ship. The angle is not very steep, so it's nice that I got it to a point where the cars weren't uncoupling once they changed height, and they had that pivot point where they could potentially uncouple. So whether you're shoving or pulling, they're not coming apart, which is nice. Unless the coupler is defective. But in this case, you're going to see that it's pretty smooth. I can always, adjust it better than what I have right here, but I thought it was smooth enough. The structure you see above the apron is basically what pulls it up and down. So there would be like large engines inside of that house. That's why you have the smokestacks on top of it. And those would be pulling chains and cables and stuff from the sides of the apron to lift it or drop it. There's also, I don't know if you can see them, but there's counterweights inside of the structure pillars, and those would be like concrete weights just to offset the weight of the bridge, so the motors don't have to work so hard. So I'm sorry about the angle here, but I was trying to do something else while I was filming this. So as the camera comes back up, this is a nice shot of how the angle of the cars look as they're coming up the ramp or up the apron. And I love that it's able to come up nice and smooth, and I don't have to spin the locomotive wheels or push really hard or anything like that. It's just nice and easy coming up to the upper level of the ferry. One thing I didn't mention is that those smokestacks on the ship are actually they make smoke. So I have 2 smoke makers, one in each stack, and they're electrically connected to a power source. Now they're not on right now, but I have a little switch that turns those on if I want them running. And that's a nice little detail. So we're coming to the end of the ferry here, and as you can see, I have these boxes with couplers that I designed myself just for like a safety feature. So I like to just couple into them. This way, if the ship for some reason has never done it, but if it leans forward as it's moving, the cars won't go flying out the front. So rather than putting a gate or something here in the front of the ship, I decided to just attach them at the back, and this way they're all nice and safe. So like I said before, I'm just doing one string of cars right here. So once I uncouple here with the tank car, I'll put the handbrake on for the hopper, and this way they'll stay put. And then this is the large warehouse in the back there that I was describing. Now this is how this works. Once the train gets off the apron here, what happens is that the way the ferry makes it up to the second level is through a system that I showed in other videos. So check those out, because there's a nice little system that I developed to make that happen without interrupting the scene that much. And I'll describe it in more detail in those videos. But for now, we're just going to close that gate, and now this is how we access the water, or the access hole for the ship to go through. That piece of wood that I took out is basically the benchwork that I cut out, and eventually it's going to have that the water effects that I have on the main level also up here. This is obviously very far from being completed, but it's going to look basically the same as the lower level. So the pegs that you saw me pushing off there, pushing back, are what hold that piece of wood that I took out, what hold it in place. So now those pegs are going to serve another purpose. As the ship goes through that hole, what's going to happen is it's going to support the ferry instead of that piece of wood. So the nice thing is that I can return the lower level back to its original look, because since the ship is going to be hovering on those pegs, I don't need the platform that's pushing it up to be there anymore. So I just return it, and this way I can do whatever work I'm doing, or if there are multiple people working on these two scenes, they don't have to have an eyesore with with pipes and screws and things sticking out. So here we go. We latched onto the caboose and pop the handbrake off so that this train can be on its way to the next facility. So as it sets off, we're going to go back to the ferry and let it sail off, or sail up in this case, to the next location, which is the upper level. So here we go. We're going to just lift the ship now. As you can see, the only part of the scene that's really being affected right now is that little platform under the ship. And I made it smaller than the ship so I can just hide under the ship for now until I make my way past the upper level here. So rather than taking the entire scene, this entire part of the benchwork up, I just made a little platform to push the ship up. And I got lucky with this hole because I did it basically by eye. But as you can see, the ship fits perfectly through. And the elevator, or the actuator that lifts the bridge, lifts the platform, I bought it a little bit longer than what the distance is here, because I wanted to be able to get access, like you see me doing here, under the boat, under the ship. So that's why I had to go past the height of the upper level. So now I'm going to bring the ship back down, now that I have the pegs in place and the little spacers. You see the grain train still going around on its own. I haven't paid attention to it at all, which is nice. No derailments, nothing. And now, as you can see, the platform is making its way down, but the ship is still on the upper level, just hovering. So it basically just it delivers it to the pegs and then makes its way down. The linear actuator that I got is a slow moving, high torque actuator. So I love the speed. I feel like it makes it more realistic, and it allows the ship to settle and not have any jerky motions. Now you're going to see the water basically disappears right here, just like that. So you have to really look at it to see that there's a cut in the water there. But again, you can see that in the other videos in more detail. Okay, so now here is the upper level. It's basically designed the same exact way as the lower level. You have an apron, you have the mechanism. It's motorized just like the bottom one, except that there's no details. There's no side panels or anything like that. But it basically works the same way. So now as the grain train makes its way through, it's going to slow down a little bit to allow for the conductor to get off the train and switch the turnout into the spur for the ferry to do its pickup. So just like before, we're going to have to drop off this caboose, uncouple from it so that we can do all the work, and then once we have everything done, we'll reattach the caboose. So we're uncoupling here, we're putting the handbrake on for the caboose, and now the conductor or the brakeman are on the end of the grain car here. And we got to obviously clear that switch, so it'll be radioed back to the engine And once we clear, we'll bring the train to a stop and we'll switch the turnout by hand. Okay, the brakeman's going to jump back on the train, on the car, and then ask the engineer to shove back over to the ferry. And as we make our way back, just to kind of show you what's going on around this little scene here, it's not supposed to be very busy. So the main port is the one in the lower levels. That had a lot of action going on there with the ship and the warehouse and all that stuff. This basically is just going to have a few holding tracks for anything that's coming off the ship or onto the ship. And that house you see in the back, that engine house in the back, is not going to be there. But there is a spur, a little track back there that's going to hold any kind of switching engines that might be necessary. If not, then I could just put a little facility there or some kind of just holding track back there as well. So now, as you can see, the angle is nice. It's not too abrupt. It's not too steep. So we're going to make contact here. Couple up, and then obviously release the handbrake and allow for us to pull the cement hoppers off the ship. So the conductor would make his way back to the last car on the ship and radio in to go ahead and pull forward. Here we go. Now the one thing that I can't seem to get rid of, and I know that it's probably never going to go away, is this little almost like springy or like an accordion type motion. I know why it's happening, but I just don't know if there's a way to get rid of it. It's happening because the couplers on some of the cars have more play than others, especially the Microtrains cars. They have it's like a spring inside the coupler, so it doesn't allow for them to just be stiff and and come down smoothly like that. But it is what it is, and it's smooth enough, and at least I don't have any major derailments or anything like that. So we're making our way off the ferry. The ferry company is probably very upset because it only had 6 cars on it. So it wasted all that fuel to just get 6 cars all the way up here to this part. But as we make our way past the turnout here for the spur, our brakeman's going to once again jump off, switch out the turnout, and then radio back to the locomotive to shove back and reconnect with the caboose. So here we go. And about 1 car, half a car, and good. Now I had to hit this caboose a little harder than usual because the coupler is a little bit defective, so I wanted to make sure it made contact. And now we're on our way, obviously, after releasing the handbrake and all that. So now we got a nice long train here with a 2-engine consist at the front, making its way again past just a big countryside, open field kind of thing. There's a dried up river here. It's kind of muddy, and a nice, beautiful, rusty bridge that we're gonna go through. I like the way the scene came out. Also, the backdrop is not finalized yet. I haven't cut it and glued it on yet. I'm still kind of, I like to put my backgrounds up for a little while just to see if I really like them or not before I permanently attach them. So I've been like it. It's been up for a few months now, and I like the way it looks. I just gotta cut the sky off the top and all that stuff. So again, we're at the end of the island here, or the peninsula rather, making our way around. There's going to be a lot of trees and shrubs and things, just to kind of break up the scene here. But right behind all that wildlife and trees and stuff, there's this cement plant. It's actually cement and gravel, as you can see there. And I'm messing around with adding more background stuff like those elevators there, the GFC, and possible, other structures that would be made for cement. So this is another one of my backgrounds that I've been kind of testing out. I wanted to have a big open, like wheat field or grain, kind of thing. So I found this other background on the same at the same company, Background Junction, and I took a straw mat and I added just a strip of it in front of the background just to make it look like more wheat or whatever, corn, hay, I don't know, something that would match that. The only problem is that the photo has like a little purple tint to it. Not sure why, maybe just because of the lighting that day. But the mat is very, very much like straw. So I might have to spray paint or add some kind of color to the straw to make it look a little bit more, sort of blends in better. Alright, so we just split the train here. Left the cement hoppers and the caboose in the back on purpose because we have a local switcher engine. There it is. That works for both industries. This is in charge of the cement and gravel and also the grain elevator to switch out cars. And the reason for that is that we have a facing and a trailing point here for the facility, so it's easier to just have this little switcher here taking care of all that stuff while the main locomotives wait on the main here. So what we're doing right now is we're picking up the grain cars, switching out that turnout. We're going to go on to the main where the local train is here and grab those cement hoppers. It'll be the first move. And again, speed limit is very low here, so we're going to take our time getting our locomotive over to the hoppers. As far as scenery goes, this is at its bare minimum right now. It's very basic, and I'm sure it'll look a lot better once I add all the, trees and sand and dirt and ballast and all that fun stuff. So here we go. We're making our way back here. We're gonna couple up to the cement cars. But first, we're going to switch out and we're going to grab the empty hoppers that need to be filled at the grain elevator. So this is a move that I saw a few times, both on a real railroad and in somebody's layout, and they're switching plans. And that is that you have cars both on the front and the back of the locomotive, and you're switching by pushing and pulling and going back and forth. So what we're going to do is just take the empties, which are I think 6 of these grain cars. Yep. And we're going to let the train that's on the main go on and go to its next destination while we switch out these cars, and then it'll be back to pick up the same cars, but they'll be filled at this point. The only other thing is that the cars that are in the holding track behind all of these are already full. So those cars are eventually going to be attached to the cars that we're about to fill. And once the local train makes its way out, we'll be able to get all these empty hoppers onto the loading track, which is the track located between the cars you see in the background and where these cars are now. One thing you're probably going to ask is, why isn't the caboose attached to the train that just left? Yeah, that's a good question. I meant to do that, but I'm just gonna pretend like the crew is gonna stay with this local train for the time being, and kind of let the crew be with this little switch here, and then once it picks up the rest of the train, we'll have the caboose join that lone train again. All right, so we just coupled on to the cement hoppers, released the brake, and now once again, like I said before, we have cars that we're shoving and cars that we're pulling within the same move. If you look in the back panels, that's my occupancy detection panels. So the red is where the trains are located at the moment, and the white is just empty tracks. So the local train that left is making its way around that back loop right now while we're in the opposite side of the upper level, making this move here. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see the other train moving back there because that loop in the back is pretty big. But, that's basically what's being dictated by those back panels. So now we've just switched the turnout. The brakeman jumped back on the front hopper here, the front covered hopper, and we're making our way into what would be the loading track. It could be used as a loading track, as a team track, or as a holding track as well. And it actually has another connection to the track on the other side. So it can be used as a siding as well, or if you're loading directly from the main train, you could just kind of feed it through the elevator. But I'm just trying to keep things interesting right now, so I'm going to say that this switcher is in charge of getting all these cars filled up. So what we're doing here right now is trying to free up the main line so that the train that's coming around and making its way can just keep going without me having to stop it and foul up the line. So we're going to back up once we disconnect from the hoppers, from the grain hoppers, in order to get the caboose out of the way onto a holding track, and then back the cement hoppers onto the loading elevators. So the conductor that was at the first hopper just walked all the way back to the locomotive and jumped on, and now is going to be working with the crew in the locomotive. So we're making our way back. I guess the only nice thing about having the caboose on is that there would be somebody in there, and they just basically switch that turnout back there, or the two turnouts, to get the caboose into the side track here. Here comes the train again, making its way around. As you can see, I don't have to worry about it because it's on the main, and we're not fouling it up. The track where the caboose is right now is actually the gravel loading track. So right now I have some coal hoppers in there, which are not going to be coal hoppers in the future, but I just wanted to kind of show that there would be some kind of cars there waiting. So now as we pull back up, we just got rid of our caboose. We threw the handbrake on for that. And the crew again that's in the caboose is probably switching out these turnouts so that we can get these cement hoppers into the loading tracks. So we're going to make our way back. Again, speed limit is important here, so we got to go nice and slow. And I got some older hoppers and some more modern hoppers here, which I like to mix and match. Some are very weathered, some are brand new. Like this one here is very old, nice and rusty. So as you can see, you have a gravel dumper there, a gravel loader there, but also behind it is the elevator for the cement plant. But the gravel line, you can see that the other hoppers there can be loaded from the other track as well. All right, so we just got to the end of that track. We're gonna leave the hoppers there, and those are gonna be loaded later on. But now the locomotive must return to the grain side, the grain elevators, and get those hoppers loaded while the train comes around once again. So while this work is being done, again, you know, I could be doing something on the lower level, or I could just kind of watch the other train go around. But that's something that I planned on purpose, because I knew that I wasn't going to have people over the house all the time. So it just makes things a little easier to run by myself rather than have to worry about every single train 100%. I could just have multiple trains running around, while I work with one particular train. All right, so now we're gonna pull these loaded hoppers out of the holding track, because they're eventually gonna be on that train. And this is kind of like 2 moves in one, because what I'm doing is I'm just gonna push back and latch onto the empty hoppers, and then just load them with these hoppers also attached. This way, when I pull back to attach to the main train that's coming through, they'll be already coupled up. So I have enough clearance here to be able to get those hoppers out and not collide into any of the cars here. Plus, I'm going to grab my caboose while I'm here. And this way, everything will be basically ready to go at the end. So now, the brakeman that had switched that is now on the front hopper, and is going to, once we release the handbrake of the caboose, it's going to shove forward and attach to the empty grain train, or the grain cars that are waiting to be loaded. So here we go. I mean, the background looks decent. It doesn't look great, but I think that's as good as it's gonna get. So now we're just attached to the empty hoppers. We're gonna obviously connect the hoses and everything that needs to happen, and then be on our way into the grain elevator so we can get those cars loaded. I'm still not 100% sure how the elevators work. I know that I've seen some situations on YouTube and stuff where, like, a car will dump everything in that shed, and then the elevator brings them up and dumps them into the tanks, into the holding tanks there, or the holding towers, whatever they're called. But also, there's a pipe that comes from the top of the building to the top of the shed that I think is what they use for loading as well. So I guess you could do both things in one shot. So I made enough track here to hold these 6 empty cars, because that's as many as I want to fill at a time. And it'll still allow for the local train to get past that and not hit or collide into the other train cars. So here's the rule I came up with. This is just me. I just kind of guesstimated what it would be to fill one of these grain cars. I just said 10 seconds each would be the same as, like, let's say, I don't know, 5 minutes or whatever. I don't know how long it actually takes to fill one of these massive things up, but I'm assuming they're pretty fast, with the technology that they have now. So that's why I'm taking my time and making sure it's a full 10 seconds per car, and then slowly creeping up and setting the next car up. So this will obviously be 60 seconds worth of time here. As you can see, the train got past those cars just fine. Even if they were like at the beginning of their loading stage, they would still not collide. There's enough clearance back there. I made these holding towers out of just gray PVC pipe, the stuff that electricians use. I forget what size the pipes are, but I just basically what I did is I cut the pieces to length, and then I took my table saw and I pushed it up against the guide, so that the blade and the guide created just a little bit of a flat spot on one side, and then that flat spot, by flipping it around and putting it up against the guide, allowed me to create exactly the same flat spot on the opposite side, as long as I had it pushed up on there correctly. And that's how I came up with these little towers here. I just repeated all of those steps to make those. It looks pretty big. The other towers on the other side are the original, the ones that come with the kit, with the Walters kit. And so now we're done loading the train. So now we got the 6 cars plus the 4 that were already loaded. So these 10 cars are going to be connected to the train on the main line as it comes around once again. So right now we got a heavy train here, so we're just working hard to not only pull those drain cars that are full, but push this caboose as well. So I'm going to creep up until the main train makes its way around. And the only thing that's going to be a little tricky is making the room needed and for the hoppers to latch on, and then also bringing the caboose back to join the back of the train. So right now on this angle right here, it looks like there's a huge open field behind the train, and that's what I was looking for. I wanted to give it a lot of depth. But the only problem with these photo backdrops is that it all depends on what angle you're looking at. Sometimes it looks really toyish, and then sometimes it looks really nice, like this. Like, the trees in the background actually blended quite nicely, now that I look at it, with the trees that I installed there. So here we go. Here's the train. I just made it back to the facility, and now what's going to be tricky here is that the grain cars that are attached to the locomotives are actually empty. They just delivered that grain, and now they're coming back to get refilled and switch out for the full hoppers. So what I'm going to do here is take the locomotive and the caboose and grab those empty cars so that I can put them on the holding track where the other cars were originally. So again, our conductor's going to jump off the locomotive, switch the cars out, and at the same time, the locomotive crew of the main train here has uncoupled and just moved forward a little bit to give room for the coupling to happen here. I guess in the real world that wouldn't need to happen, but since this is not the real world, I figured I'd give it a little room. So we're going to couple up here. Yeah, it didn't quite click in, so just putting a little more pressure on it, and I think we're good to go. So now we're going to pull back, and once we clear the turnout, we're going to shove all these empties into that holding track for loading later on. So this entire process took about an hour and a half, maybe a little under. So it's nice because, I can do just this part of the layout and not feel like that's all I have in my entire layout. So I have plenty of time to do all this stuff and make it worthwhile, and then move on to another facility the next day, or maybe do 2 facilities, and that'll be hours of fun. So here we go. We just switched out that turnout, and now we're going to shove back so that we can get these hoppers onto the holding track. And at the same time, the locomotives might start making their way back a little bit to get closer to the turnout. This way they don't have to travel so far once the switcher makes that switch. So as they get ready to do that, this local switcher is still making the shove. And there we are. So obviously, conductor would jump back off the train, uncouple, set the handbrake, and then go by the turnout so that it can switch out to the other one. As you can see, the other locomotives are making their way back now. And that's easy because the wide throttle that I have on my iPhone allows me to do 2 things at once. So two locomotives, or a consist of locomotives and another locomotive, any combination, but I basically have 2 throttles in one. So here we go. We just uncoupled and we're moving back just past the turnout so our conductor can change it up, and we can attach ourselves once again to the filled or the loaded hoppers. There's the switch. And the conductor would then jump back on the locomotive around the front there and radio to the engineer to move forward and slowly approach the hopper so they can couple up. So once we make contact here, we release the handbrake from the hoppers, attach the hoses, and then radio to the engineer once again to pull all these cars out. And then once the last car clears the turnout, then the locomotives will be waiting right there. So here we go. Again, the train's working real hard. There's a lot of weight in these hoppers. And like I said before, we still have the caboose attached here, so what we're going to have to do is attach all these cars to the locomotives that are waiting, then allow for the locomotive to make it, to make its way forward and allow for the last hopper to clear the turnout. Then pull the local switcher forward and drop off the caboose near the rest of the train, and then get it out of the way basically, so that the train can back up and latch onto the caboose. So here we are with the loaded cars. And the brakeman would have been standing there from the last move, waiting to make that switch. Now it'll jump on the car here and radio back to the engineer to make contact with the locomotives here and couple up. So now this train is pretty much ready to go with the exception of the caboose. So we're going to radio to the front engines to start making their way up slowly. We've obviously already disconnected in the back, or we're about to, I think. Yeah, we're disconnected already, and now the local train is moving up slowly, and the switch is going to wait here until there's enough room just to avoid any accidents, and then it'll slowly start creeping up and following along. And of course, the brakeman now is on the last car here and is about to radio to the front to stop. And he would have jumped off right before the split here on the turnout, so that he can now that the train is clear, he can now switch for the local switcher to make its way into the little holding tracks here, and also drop off the caboose right before that. Alright, so that's about it right there. Then we uncouple and set the handbrake while the switcher engine makes its way back into the facility and says goodbye. The brakeman would still be standing by the turnout. He just switched the turnout right there, and now is radioing to the main train to back up slowly and make contact with the caboose in about half a car. Good. Again, I had to, I don't know if you saw that, but I had to kind of check to see if the coupler was working. So now the conductor or brakeman go back onto the caboose, release the brake, and they're on the way. Once they get going, all that's left is for the local switcher to basically park the train, and we'll be done for today as far as work in these two facilities. So once this train is pretty much out of the way, which by the way, I like that scene a lot. I like the way it looks right there. Then the train crew for the switcher can start lining up the switchers, the turnouts, and allow for the locomotive to park in one of the holding tracks. And here we go. We're lined up, and obviously the main was already cleared, so that the train can keep going around. And this is basically where we started, except now that we have our cement cars ready to be loaded, we can do that at another time.